afternoon, everybody. To everybody in the room, to those at home or wherever tuning in virtually, Cage Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes. My name is Anna Kelly. I'm the Director of UCD Access and Lifelong Learning, and we're absolutely thrilled, we're beyond thrilled, in fact, to have a live event, to be in person and to be looking at a real live audience. And of course, you at home, you're tuning in from your kitchen table or wherever. We're thrilled that you are going to join us here today. And we have an exciting hour or so where we will discuss the University for All, but from the perspective of the student. And we will hear about students shaping University for All, disrupting our thinking, and the contribution that they have made. So before I hand over to our illustrious speakers, I have some housekeeping to run through. We're obviously recording here today, so that will be available. Our photographer, those of you who are in the room, can see Angela, who's taking some photographs, so we'll have those. We want to invite you, obviously, to submit questions or comments or observations or whatever. So those who are live streaming, would you send your feedback or your questions through the Q&A function, if you would, please. And my colleague, Dr. Lisa Patton and Daniel Elliott, would be monitoring the comments and the feedback, and hope we'll be able to answer those questions later. So it gives me great pleasure now to introduce the Registrar and Deputy President of UCD, Professor Mark Rogers. And Mark has led this initiative, University for All, so he's going to briefly talk to you about system change in higher education. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anna, and good afternoon and welcome to this University for All seminar. A particular welcome to Minister Harris. We're delighted that you're with us here on World Higher Education Access Day. A warm welcome too to UCD colleagues and friends from across the education sector, and we're very grateful to Simon O'Connor as we broadcast this event from Molly, the Museum of Literature Ireland. And it's a pleasure to greet those in the room and those attending virtually. This seminar, the third in the University for All series, From Consultation to Collaboration, the student role in creating a University for All, will explore the power of the student voice in creating systemic change, and will discuss our thinking about the concept of student support and engagement. It'll discuss how students have disrupted thinking and moved thinking beyond opening doors to participating, informing, and shaping every aspect of university life. We're here in Newman House, which has been reimagined and is now home to Molly, and it's fitting that we invoke the pioneering spirit of our founder, John Henry Newman, here, the birthplace of our university. 167 years after Newman's ideas of a university, UCD's University for All initiative continues to shape and inform higher education. Uniquely in the Irish higher education, Irish higher education, UCD is pioneering institutional transformation to create an inclusive culture and promote system change, where all students belong and are valued, and where the philosophy of a student is a student underpins the development of universally designed mainstream systems, processes, and approaches. Newman was an educational visionary of the 19th century. The National Access Policy sets out the vision for higher education for the 21st century. This vision moves access and inclusion from being an institutional add-on to being integral to the higher education institution, becoming an institutional core belief and value that is practiced and demonstrated. In UCD, as in many other universities and higher education institutions, significant progress has been made to widen participation of underrepresented groups. This national policy vision goes much further. It challenges the sector to move beyond opening doors, beyond the development of a pipeline of diverse students, beyond targeted interventions, and beyond silos, beyond quotas, beyond labels, beyond the rhetoric of access. National access policy calls for systemic change. It asks institutions to translate the vision for diversity and inclusion into tangible changes across all aspects of campus life. UCD's founder, St. Cardinal Newman, set us a challenge to turn our eyes to 100 years from now. And what would we want of a university in the future? What can we picture? An education institution that is radically different, one where access and inclusion are no longer mentioned, no longer known. No one knows the term mainstream. There is no access office, and there are no targeted entry pathways, no reserved quotas, no one speaks about youngsters. The concept of full-time and part-time students are alien. There are no special funding streams and designated groups. Instead, the University of the Future would embrace all students equitably. The learning experience universally designed and configured to meet the needs and aspirations of all students. And we are turning our eyes to a university for all. This is not an easy road to travel, and I'm not suggesting that this transformation is without its challenges. It requires leadership, determination, and courage. As we know, higher education institutions are complex organizations with different traditions and structures, competing priorities, external pressures, and financial constraints. And most recently, of course, we have experienced the pandemic, causing resulting disruption. Paradoxically, the onset of the pandemic crystallized the message of inclusion and reinforced the importance of a universally designed learning experience, where all students belong and are not considered other. The pandemic also highlighted the kindness of the university community. Their efforts ensure our students were supported throughout the pandemic were considerable. Notwithstanding these, however, is it not time to move beyond reliance on a kindness and instincts of individuals? Is it not time to be brave? Today's seminar is focusing on the role of the student in a university for all and is intended to prompt a fresh perspective on student support and experience. This is critical to student success and should not be considered as other, siloed, or only an operational task. Rather, a student support and experience are integral to student success in the same way as teaching and research. Is it not time to integrate our practice so that all students, wherever they come from and whatever their background, receive a tailored educational experience that meets their needs and requirements without the need for labels? In UCD, we're serious about achieving the vision of University for All. The University for All initiative was launched by the Minister for Higher Education in 2017, and I'm delighted to report that implementation is well underway. We have a range of arrangements in place to ensure that implementation, including University for All is embedded in university strategies, including Rising to the Future, UCD Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, the Action Plan, and the UCD Education and Student Success Strategy. Oversight is in part undertaken by the University Widening Participation Committee. It is governed by University Management Groups for Education and Student Success and the University EDI Committee. We have devolved responsibility through the academic and administrative structures, whereby deans, college principals and directors hold overarching responsibility. And we have assigned local faculty leads to coordinate implementation. And we've assigned Access and Lifelong Learning as a unit to provide expertise and know-how. In addition, universal design is a core tenet of University for All, and in collaboration with AHEAD, we co-lead the provision of the digital badge for universal design in teaching and learning, awarded to over 1,000 recipients across Ireland, with over 1,000 currently enrolled. We've created a resource hub offering an impressive array of materials, the core of which is the Toolkit for Inclusive Higher Education Institutions, which offers a self-assessment institution-wide lens to assess progress and create bespoke inclusion implementation plans. These plans are hosted on the Registrar's website in UCD and are so available to the entire university community. There are, in my view, other essential ingredients to underpin the concept of a student is a student in higher education. And yes, I speak about funding, or rather equitable funding. To achieve institutional transformation, equitable financial support that enables all students to study on either both a full or part-time basis is critical. Alongside this student support, the sector needs to be funded on the basis of volumes of accredited learning, which would enable both full and part-time students to participate equitably. And finally, in 2017, UCD began the implementation of University for All. Like the entire world, we didn't anticipate COVID-19, and in hindsight, this decision was prescient. University for All is predicated on meeting the needs of all students equitably. and COVID-19 added further impetus to this objective. It reinforced the need for universally designed learning environments. The challenge now arising is how to ensure that we do not revert to our pre-pandemic approach. University for All offers a vision and a strategy to create a universally designed higher education institution, and our students expect and need nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Registrar, personally, I found that most visionary and inspirational address. And I think our Registrar has shown the way for higher education. He certainly has shown the way for UCD, and I look forward to the realisation of his vision over the next several years. Now it's my great honour to turn to the Minister for Further and Higher Education Research and Innovation, Minister Simon Harris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and Dr. Kelly and Professor Rogers, thank you very much for the invitation to be here with you today, both in person and virtually, and thank you also for your words. I too found them very inspiring and found them very enlightened, and certainly was sitting there, you were motivating me as you were speaking, because I think you have shown a real and comprehensive understanding of where we need to get to in relation to higher education in Ireland, and not just in terms of seeing higher education as a silo, but indeed the societal and economic benefits of a university for all actually being that. And I'll give you some thoughts on that in a moment. But I really am delighted to be here today at this UCD event, and want to thank you very much for inviting me as we celebrate, at least celebrate as you can in a COVID context, World Access to Higher Education Day. And I do want to begin with the word of thanks, because I know so many people in UCD, from staff representatives to student representatives, and I see the president of the student union, Rory, here, to management, have worked so hard and hand in glove with public health to get students back to campus. And I must say, I'm getting a real kick out of visiting campuses and hearing noise again, because I was walking around a lot of very empty ones last year, and that's not to suggest people weren't working extremely hard. Of course they were, but last year so much must have had to go online. It's really great to see, not just from an educational point of view, but from a well-being point of view, our students, young and not so young, back in third-level institutions. I was in one this morning in this city, and just to really hear the feedback from students, and indeed to hear their message to me, please don't ever go back to online learning fully in terms of closing the campuses. And I want to assure everybody that our sector will continue to do what we've always done: work together, support each other, keep each other safe, and keep face-to-face on-campus learning going as well. And I want to thank everybody for the work that they're doing. I know it's pretty relentless, but it's very much appreciated by all in government, and most importantly, I know by our student population. Anyway, University for All is, of course, the focus of today's seminar. And let me be very clear, I suppose, at the outset, as Ireland's first ever Minister for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science, of course, access to higher education is a priority of mine. But much like the Registrar, I think we need to challenge ourselves in terms of what we actually mean by that, because we can't stop there. We need to write a future for our students where higher education is viewed as socially and economically inclusive, one where access is the first step but not the end game. I think this is really important. It's one challenge to get somebody in the doors of a university. It's very different to get somebody in the doors and successfully through a university. And the collective goal I think we must set is a higher education system where everybody, regardless of their background, their gender, their ethnicity, what their mother or father did before them, can achieve their educational goals by graduating in their course and by realising their full individual potential. And your initiative, University for All, is a really great example, in a very practical sense, of institutional specific models that can be adopted to bring the words on page to a real life experience. Because I sometimes think, and I don't mean this to be critical of anyone, or maybe it's critical of myself, I sometimes think it's easy to kind of hide behind national words or national strategies, and they're all terribly important. The bigger challenge, though, is how do you apply those goals to your own institution? And that's what you're doing here with this very practical institutional specific model that others can learn from, but everybody must have one for their own institution and one that works for their university. This UCD initiative is pioneering institutional transformation, endeavouring to create an inclusive culture and promote system change. And this is creating a university where all students belong and all students are valued, and where the philosophy of a student is a student underpins the development of university designed systems and processes. This does chime very precisely with one of the key strategic goals of my department, that of inclusion. Our ambition is to ensure that we provide supports and opportunities for learning for all. And I just want to share with you some of the initiatives we've progressed since the establishment last year around student supports and as we've worked through our National Access Plan. But then I maybe more importantly want to share the vision beyond where we are now. Quite rightly, I think we all prize our education system in this country. We boast about it nationally and internationally, and we do recognise that access to third level is an essential service. We've been working to put in place supports for students attending college, including financial supports. We have seen a number of improvements to the SUSI grant scheme, extending the postgraduate grants, which to be honest have been paltry, and we've a lot more work to do in relation to that. We've abolished the PLC levy. We've secured an extra €20 million for 2022, recognising that a lot of people in this country are going to see change of circumstances as a result of COVID, and therefore more people may well need to rely on the SUSI grant scheme. And we've made some of the first changes in a decade to student supports. Now, my colleague and the Student Union President, Rory, would say that it's not enough. Of course, he's right. It's only a start. But it is a start, and it's the first start in a decade. And what we have to do now is work together to radically overhaul the entire student grant system, because it doesn't understand students and it doesn't understand their families. It looks at the amount of money that somebody earns, but it doesn't look at the outgoings in a household. It treats 23-year-olds like they're still 18-year-olds, which I know is a big bugbear of an awful lot of people. It doesn't understand some of the huge costs that people face, and of course accommodation being the main one around that. So we're not just talking about this. There is, as we speak, a full radical review of SUSI underway with many key stakeholders and your representative bodies in the room as well. We've also though got to put in place specific supports, and I take the point I'd look forward to the day when we don't need these specific supports, I truly do, but I think we do need to continue to put in place specific supports for students most at risk of educational disadvantage, and our learners with additional needs. And I've been travelling around the country meeting students and staff in universities and colleges, and I do think we've a lot of work to do together in making sure that the Access Office and student groups are as aligned as possible, and that the Access Office is really embedded as a core part of all of our universities. When I hear of student assistance funds, not in UCD, but in some places having a surplus, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing at all. I was in one college last week and they were nearly boasting that there was a surplus in the student assistance fund. That's a sign to me that the system isn't working. So we need to look at how we can make sure access to and availability and knowledge and signposting of the existing supports. We can debate about all the new supports we need, but at least of what is there is really there and very clear. The Fund for Students with Disability, which I must say I'm really proud to see the concrete differences that making, and concrete actually being an intentional word with some of the capital projects. I've been in some amazing sensory rooms, cam zones as well that have been funded through that as well, and of course the student support scheme. And we have provided a lot of laptops as well, recognising that we live in a society that has got a digital divide, and that digital divide has been accelerated, not caused by, but accelerated by the pandemic, and more than 17,000 laptops provided through my department to the higher education system as well. And I'm particularly pleased, as recently as last week, to be able to announce some additional funding for students from the traveller community and the Roma community as well, an area with a lot more work we need to do to make sure that there's true opportunity for people from those communities to reach their full potential as well. We boast a lot, and I could stand here with a script and I could say, isn't it great that we've really, really good progression rates between second level education and higher education, and I could tell you that about 66% of second level students are going into university, and everything I've said is true. But of course it's not fully true at all, because lies, damn lies and statistics. Behind that figure masks a bigger truth and a more important truth. That figure drops to 40% when you go to DESH schools. So yes, we've seen progress, but it hasn't been equal. Hasn't been equal at all, and I really want to, at this event, pay tribute to the UCD School of Education for the specific work you're doing with DESH schools. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to launch with your School of Education a brilliant programme where you're reaching out to DESH schools. I think, I can't actually remember the number, but many DESH schools, indeed one in Bray, St Killian's that I was in, and you're making it clear to students that university is an option for them. But not just that, your staff are providing effectively online tuition to help the student get the few extra points in biology or get the few extra points in maths to make university attainable. And I really want to thank UCD and pay tribute to you for that leadership. Sometimes a university that is geographically very close can still feel a million miles away to families in our country, and we've got to recognise that, and we've all got to redouble our efforts, and I really pay tribute to UCD for the work that you're doing. Next year is going to be an exciting opportunity for advocates of widening access to higher education, because we're going to have our new National Access Plan. And early in 2022, I will launch this. This is a very collaborative process being developed with the sector, with students, with the student voice absolutely at the centre, and with the Higher Education Authority. We have made great progress under the 3 previous plans, and we've hit our disability targets, and I'm very proud that we have. But sometimes when we hit targets, I wonder, did we hit them or were they too easy? You know, I think we have to challenge ourselves a little bit here in terms of stretching our ambition. We also have to look at what we measure and what we don't measure. When it comes to our National Access Plan, we've measured some disabilities and we've completely pretended others don't exist. And that's not acceptable either. So this National Access Plan has to be truly inclusive in terms of what we mean when it comes to access. For me, an issue that's personally extremely important to me and politically important also is the issue of intellectual disability. I've sat in rooms of parents of children with Down syndrome who've told me not only do they not see their child progress after their child leaves second level, they watch their child regress because of our failure as a state to address the cliff edge that can sometimes exist between second level and third level. So again, not rhetoric. In the budget, we now have €5 million for initiatives to help pathways for people with an intellectual disability from second level into third level. And I really look forward to working with UCD and learning from you and your experiences and students in relation to practical measures that we can take in place. What should we do with the 5 million as an initial step, as a conversation I want to start with the sector in the coming weeks as well. I just want to maybe leave you with a couple of issues that I think we really need to address when it comes to a university for all. I think we have to be very honest with each other that we can't now have a conversation about access and inclusion without recognising that student accommodation is now an access issue. It's an access issue. It's not just a housing issue, it's an access issue. And I have to tell you, and I think in politics it's important when things aren't working that you actually just say it rather than come up with some speaking points to defend it. The current policy around student accommodation is broken. It's broken, it's not working. And the reason it's not working is that you can't manage to build college-owned student accommodation that's affordable for students in this country. Not working. And that's just the simple fact of it. And it's not for me to blame the university or the university to blame me. It's for the university and my department to work together to come up with a new model. And I'm really excited about we are going to do this. We are going to work together to develop a cost rental model that works for universities. We have to recognise the cost at the moment for university in meeting the affordability challenge is too high, and we have to work with them to find practical solutions. And I don't just mean UCD, I'm talking about right across our country. But I do think a university for all will not be a university for all unless we get real and get serious about affordable college-owned student accommodation. We've been too reliant on the private market to address this issue. Private market has a role to play in our country, a big role, but it can't play every role. And that's just, I thought it would be an elephant in the room for me to ignore that issue today. Another issue, just when we talk about a university for all, and indeed you mentioned it, Registrar, I think the profile of a student is going to keep on changing in Ireland. So anytime I do a media interview in Ireland, I get asked, all the questions are as though I'm being asked about a student who's 18 or 19 or 20, and there's many students who are 18 or 19 or 20, and I'm proud to be their minister. But more and more we're going to see students in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s. I met one the other day in their 80s in further education. And you're going to see people with dependents, you're going to see people with a mortgage, you're going to see people with a full-time job, you're going to see people who can't pack the bags and head to UCD for 4 years, but they still need education. Be they needing an opportunity to go back to higher education or to get a piece of education, a module of education. And when the Registrar rightly mentioned the issue of funding, we're going to have that conversation about how we fund that in a way that works. Because the profile of a student is going to radically change. It's already changing, but if you're looking at the stats I'm looking at, it's only going to change more and more as we try to meet the skills need of our country. So I think the university for all has to be conscious of the variety of profiles of students. A university for all can't truly be a university for all unless every student and staff member feels safe, feels respected, feels valued, doesn't feel discriminated against, unless sexual harassment is taken extremely seriously. Sexual harassment is not an issue confined to higher education, far from it, but we should lead. If you're not safe in university, where else are you going to be? These are we're enlightened institutions. People learn the values that they take with them on their career journey, on their family journey from a university. And I really want to thank UCD for all the work you've done in relation to action plans around this and working with my department, and we're working with the whole sector. But I think that's something we all need to redouble our efforts on. Consent, promoting consent, complaints processes, reporting tools for staff and students is something that I think we have to work on as we try to deliver the university for all. And my final point in contributing to this discussion today is how we broaden the discussion around student success in life. There isn't a right way or a wrong way to get an education. There's just different ways. And I do feel that we've been having too narrow a conversation in Ireland about pathways to education. I do think we put a ridiculous level of pressure on our 16 and our 17-year-old students and their parents and their teachers and the points race and all of this sort of stuff. And there's an awful lot of people that I'm meeting day in, day out who've never heard of an apprenticeship. I met 3 students in Carlow the other day. All 3 of them went back to apprenticeships, one after getting a university degree in accounting and finance. Never told about an apprenticeship in school, never saw it as an option. I meet people who just about miss out on the points for university and are gutted on the day of the CAO results. Do a year in further education and training, love it, and actually tell me, you know what, if I had had the option of kind of doing this, let's call it transition year after school, and then going into university, I would have gone that way too. And I meet university presidents and registrars and professors who actually tell me that we could really address the dropout rate and support student retention in university if we provide people with that space and don't rush them into what do I want to do as my university degree tomorrow. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we've taken the first step and we have changed effectively the CAO website. So this year, for the first time ever, when a student logs on to cao.ie/options, they'll see, in my layman's term, 3 buttons. One for the traditional CAO, one for further education, where they're within 4 clicks of being able to apply for a further education course in a college of further education, and a new button where they can look at, you can't apply for an apprenticeship online, but you can look at all of the information, and a new guidance helpline for school leavers, where they can talk to a guidance counsellor specifically about what is an apprenticeship, how does it work, and again, challenging views about what apprenticeships is. Yes, there's craft apprenticeships, but do people know in Ireland you can do a master's in science and a PhD in engineering? As an apprentice. I'm not sure many people do. So I think as we look at a university for all, we have to look at a 3rd level system for all, and one that isn't just confined to entry and pathways through the traditional CAO route. And that's just some thoughts that I wanted to leave you with today. But in conclusion, I'm really pleased to be here with you. I really want to applaud UCD for all that you do, not just as one of our leading universities that we're so proud of in this country, but specifically for your initiative in relation to a university for all. We need to do this in a collaborative fashion. I have a piece of work that I need to do, to put it mildly. We all have a piece of work that we need to do in terms of how we create a system that works for the 21st century. And you're exactly right today to put the voice of the student at the heart of what we do, because that is what we exist for. We don't exist for the institution or the government or the department. We exist to create an education system that's flexible, agile and accessible to all. And I really think this initiative, running now for a number of years, is a really, really good contribution to that. And thank you so much for having me here today. Gormagat.
Thank you very much, Minister. You have raised the bar even further. I was talking about the vision that the Registrar and Deputy President had set out in the University for All. What I heard the Minister say is that he wanted a system for all. So I certainly am thrilled at the prospect of a system for all. You have to leave now, Minister. Before you do, we would like to make a little presentation to you. So Daniel, my colleague, is going to bring up these flowers, and these are not just any flowers. Bairbre will do the necessary. These are not just any flowers, Minister. If you want to have a look at they are the protea flower. It is now the national flower of South Africa, but we have colonised it through Bairbre, who sourced this. It's the flower of University for All, and we have named it that because that flower comes in many hundreds of colours, many hundreds of shapes. It signifies diversity, courage, and transformation. I think it's very appropriate for today, and it's very appropriate in the context of your vision for a system for all. All right. So, thank you, Minister. Okay, so now can we move on to our next speaker, who is Simon O'Connor. Simon is the director and the visionary, we are full of visionaries here today, behind this wonderful setting, Molly. So can I invite Simon to address you, please?
Thank you, Professor Kelly. Dr. Kelly, we're delighted to have you all here today. We're delighted to be able to host this event at Molly. We're standing in the old physics theatre of UCD, which was the setting for the Tundish episode of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce, who was arguably the most well-known graduate of the university. Joyce, interestingly, was at the very, very core of the Molly project, of the museum project. On the one hand, obviously, for his literary achievements, but I think particularly his democratizing nature, his use of his art form as a means of expressing an empathy for all of humanity was something that filtered out into nearly every aspect of how this museum was devised over time, from the exhibitions to the way the organization itself was structured. Very early on, when we were setting up the museum, I remember having a conversation with some of our board members about what we felt were the barriers that the project faced, and one of the things I suggested at the time was that the two biggest assets of the museum were its two biggest barriers: literature and the architecture that we're standing in. Both things are, both the art form and the architecture are magnificent. They're also held in huge regard by people, and then that manner of regard and that level of study actually and attention creates barriers to access. So in a way, the challenge with Molly was how do we break down those barriers from before we even opened the museum? And the way I suppose the way we went about those challenges, I mean, will kind of seem in some ways maybe quite mundane, and in other ways not. But from the very beginning, the act of naming the project became the first means of addressing those barriers. I remember we had a conversation with an agency who was helping us to brand the museum, and we said, you know, on the one hand, we need a very serious name because it's a very serious project, and we need to have a name for the project that describes what it is and what it does and what its ambition is. But then we need a name that subverts that gravitas in a way, and a name that actually holds its arms open and says, come in here. And if you can squeeze a Joyce reference into it, all the better. So they came up with Molly, and even the way we treated how we, and this is to use kind of, you know, marketing speak, but even how we activated that brand in terms of the use of colour. You know, it would have been very, very easy to make a museum that was for literature lovers, a museum that was for, you know, and to put a demographic on it, white middle-class people who were between the ages of 30 and 65 who lived in even-numbered postcodes within 6 kilometres of this building. That would have been the easiest thing in the world to do. The real challenge, and actually this is a sustainability issue as well, the real challenge for us is to reach everybody else, because those people I just described are going to come in here anyway. Their children are going to come in here at some point as well. Reaching the children who will never be brought to this museum was a huge challenge and a massive goal for us from the very beginning. And I think this was when we first came across the staff in UCD All and felt that, you know, we had found kindred spirits within the university. I mean, the link to the university is hugely beneficial for a cultural institution like this. But to see that on the ground, the heavy lifting that's going on in UCD All was really inspiring for us. And very early on, our learning programs focused, Minister Harris mentioned deaf schools, our learning programs were developed before the museum opened with local deaf schools. We continuously focus on deaf schools. About 70% of the schools that avail of our learning programs, which are free, are deaf schools, but we also work an awful lot in, I suppose, what we're beginning to term the community development component of the museum, and that's working with youth and community groups, other educational organisations, teacher training, everywhere that we can get into those routes to children, and on the one level offer ourselves as a resource, but also open up those entry points to the subject matter that we have here. On an organisational level as well, you know, when Professor Rogers and when Minister Harris were talking about the role of the student in the university and in shaping the direction that the university goes in relation to access and EDI, we're a young organisation with a very young staff base, and we face those organisational challenges within the museum as well, and it's incumbent on us as we develop this new business and this new organisation to work with our staff to create access in. And this is, this is the really unglamorous work of policies, of systems. It's not the type of thing that we have big press launches for. It's all happening in the background, board approvals of systems. But thankfully, we're beginning to see the routes into working within the museum changing. And it's slow work, but it's essential. And we have a lot of students working here as well. We have very recent graduates from university working here. And it's important that, just as a cultural institution as well, that we don't have one culture on the outside to the public and then a completely different culture on the inside. And that's something that is very, very easy to do. And it's very easy to ignore the importance of the internal culture of the museum and how it gives people an opportunity to work within these institutions and shape the strategies of these institutions as well. Very, very brief introduction, I suppose, to some of the work here that we're doing, but delighted that you're all here today, and delighted that we could even play a small role in supporting the work of UCD Hall, which is inspiring to everybody here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And that was a very quick run-through about the story of Molly, and I certainly know from my discussions with Simon the journey that Simon and his team have been on with the UCD team in Estates in particular to develop this wonderful facility. And it's great to see it open again, and we look forward to using it and cooperating with you and your staff in the years to come. So now we're turning to yet another visionary. We're going to hear more about disruption, and you used the word disruptors, Simon, and I think the contribution that we will hear from Dr. Bairbre Fleming, who is the Deputy Director of Access and Lifelong Learning, together with the students Amy, Anu and Tobias, who are going to talk to us about moving from empathy to empowerment in student support. Bairbre.
Can't do this without the students. So Amy and Tobias and Anu are going to join us now, and take your seats there when you're ready. That's lovely, thank you. So we're in the old physics theatre. I don't think I ever visualised myself in a physics theatre in any context, Simon. So that's another first. But I suppose it's very opportune that we're standing in these wonderful rooms, and it prompts us really to reflect, I think, and to think back and to imagine the origin of our university and the idea of that university. And in the generations since Newman first imagined UCD, the idea of that university has changed, as we've heard today through some of those really interesting discussions earlier. And I particularly liked Anna's summary of it being kind of the system change, a system for all. So one of those key changes in the time that I've been working as part of University for All is how we design and deliver student support in an integrated and student-centred way. We don't have to reflect too far to consider the changes in how we have perceived student support. When we captured the origins of our disability supports in UCD, for example, when my colleague Michelle Tracy and I looked at it, we established that the earliest expression of support for students with a disability was in the form of a bench, believe it or not, and that those students who wanted specific support gathered at a bench in UCD to organise and request specific supports. The early service that evolved from that bench was a well-intentioned and carefully managed support system that anticipated the needs of the small numbers of students declaring a disability towards the end of the last century. Similarly, we've captured our history in supporting students from low-income households. The scheme, called New Era, was operated again using a dedicated support team who identified and anticipated individual supports or fixes to help students adapt to university life. So those supports were shaped and driven by staff. And now we fast forward to 2021. And when we meet students now for the first time, we talk to them about student autonomy and everything that's implied in that. And autonomy is a powerful gift and a responsibility. In our initial conversations with students, I tend to invoke the analogy of a car. For many incoming first years, their experience of second-level education involves sitting in the back seat of that car and going in a predetermined route and at a predetermined speed. The student has minimal choice or input in any of the decisions being made in that journey. And then students transition to higher education. And over the course of a few short weeks, in some cases, our first-year students are moved directly into the driver's seat. And I think many of us have a direct experience of that. And the run was lost, and we all remember that transition and that rapid immersion into the driver's seat. So the student now directs where they're going with their study, how often they'll attend, how they'll participate, what their workload will be for each module they study. And this analogy and its implications also relates to the professional staff involved in student support in higher education. And we heard the Minister earlier talk about the importance of each and every member of staff too. The professional staff have also been involved in change and reflecting on how to support student autonomy. In that context, staff have shifted their focus from being chauffeur or oracle, and they now guide or empower students. I would argue that student support is therefore, it's not an operational task, it's not a fix, it's a strategy towards empowerment, and it's a strategy to embed student success. In this context, the newly launched Student Success Strategy from the Teaching and Learning Forum highlights the need for staff to be, and I quote, supported, motivated, connected, empowered, and recognised for their commitment to the enhancement of teaching and learning and student success, end quote. The professional staff who support our students have developed new and complex skills to allow them adapt and design supports that have universal application for our 21st century institutions. They need to be reflective practitioners who can observe changes in student needs, who can co-create with students, and who can support students in an inclusive and sustainable way. That over-quoted analogy, give a man a fish, has direct relevance to our work in student support. Our inclusive universities teach our students to fish, or drive, or direct their own work. They do this through researching their own areas of expertise and harnessing the best practice in our field. To do this, our colleagues in student support are earning the same respect that we offer teaching and research in our institutions. And yet, in higher education, we're slow to recognise, celebrate and reward that work. To be truly inclusive in our ambition, we need to be inclusive in how we recognise all activities in our institutions and to recognise the contribution of student support and engagement in our mission. In an inclusive university, we could reflect on how inclusive we are in the parity of esteem and treatment offered to all who play key roles in the student's educational experience, the opportunities, rewards and recognition offered, and the status conferred on that activity. An inclusive culture demands that we grapple with such issues. We could also explore new ways to forge links between academic and professional staff, to include professional staff in relevant research proposals, for example, and inclusive initiatives to valorise their contribution. This act of inclusion would promote our idea of a university for all. One of the pillars, as you know, in our University for All strategy is the engagement of students in shaping the supports. We're reminded of Tinto's observation that access without effective support is not opportunity. Our work in University for All focuses on establishing what is effective to maximise opportunities for all students. To do that, we need to collaborate with our students and determine what is effective and how do our students wish to use those supports. Today, we will hear from 3 students who modelled this approach during their studies in UCD. They have been effective drivers who have forged a path for us in relation to key initiatives around student support. They will describe the paths that they have taken in driving their particular agendas. Anu will describe her work supporting students through her work as an Access leader and specifically the role she has played as a digital ambassador. Tobias will talk about his active student role in developing supports and services, and he's specifically working on academic advising projects and giving agency to students. And Amy will round it off with talking about students as advocates and having a platform to disrupt that thinking. And when they're finished, I will conclude with some comments of my own. So from where you're sitting, I'm going to ask Anu to start with your piece. Are you comfortable to stay sitting there, Anu? Are you okay there? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bairbre. So basically, as an access leader, I've had the opportunity to be involved in so many different programs, and from like open day events to events where I'm helping other students apply to support funds. And within all these programs, I've had the opportunity to give my input, and my contribution has always been wanted. Like this is like our contribution as an access leader. It's always pretty evident with things like the open day. You can see that it's specifically geared towards the students, from the language used to the activities like that are set up. You can tell that that students our age or students within our generation were definitely involved in the creating of it. And with the Digital Ambassadors program that I had the opportunity to be involved with, it's probably one of my favorite programs I'm involved in. Basically, the concept is to help other access students with any technical issues they're having with whatever they're doing at the moment. So it's myself and 3 other students. We spearhead this particular program. The point is that many access students may not have had opportunity to have technology in the past, so we help them sort of gain technological freedom and give them confidence. This role is actually pretty rewarding because you can see the confidence they have once they leave, and overall it's kind of the point of access and lifelong learning. It sort of encompasses what it's about, giving us confidence and giving us confidence in our own ability, and this confidence does shape our university experience because it makes us feel more confident in what we're doing and reminds us that we're deserving of where we're supposed to be. Other programs I've had the opportunity to be involved with in Access is things like course videos, where we would record videos talking about our experience in college and our courses. So these videos would be uploaded, and I was actually told by someone that they'd seen these videos and how much it had helped them. So it sort of shows how much access and lifelong learning, it doesn't just help current students, but it helps prospective students. So it's encouraging to see that our contribution isn't only helping people here, but people who are interested in college and knowing that they have our courses as an option for them as well. Another program that we were given the opportunity to do within Digital Ambassadors was the podcast. So again, this sort of showed how much our contribution is important, because the 4 Digital Ambassadors, we basically, we're in control of everything. We're in control of the editing, the designing, the topics that were spoken about. So we were given the opportunity to create something that we ourselves as students would love to hear. So we talked about our day-to-day life as students, coming into college, the transition from secondary school to college life. And I've heard from people that they have really enjoyed the podcast. So again, seeing that our contribution is actually having a meaningful impact is something that's really encouraging. So overall, I found that Access has really helped with confidence outside of access settings. It's made me be more willing to say yes to different opportunities I've been given, whether it's in a university setting or in a professional setting. And I think that many other access students could relate to this particular sentiment, that it does really help us to feel heard and feel seen and feel that the things we're saying are being actioned out. Thank you.
Cool. Is this working? Is this actually plugged in or plugged on? Yeah, you can hear me okay? Okay, well, I guess it's an honour to be here, and thanks very much for inviting me down to say a few words. Yeah, so it's been there's been so much food for thought after listening to everybody. If I could sum it up, I guess it kind of ties in, what everybody has said so far kind of ties in nicely with my kind of take on it. And I guess my own kind of childhood experience of kind of educational exclusion has kind of been well countered at this stage, and seems like a kind of lifetime away from my current experience in UCD as a kind of an accepted, kind of included scholar, you know. And I guess in my day-to-day activities, I kind of enthusiastically employ generative thinking and kind of agentic action in my role, both as a student and as someone who kind of endeavours to support others along their journey through higher ed. I guess on campus, I'm kind of reflective. I'm immersed in a community where kind of social capital and human development are founded on the riches of inclusion and the treasures of diversity in a learning environment that facilitates social equity and equality of outcome for all students. And throughout my day-to-day routine, I aspire to reproduce the phenomenal work of the Access and Lifelong Learning Centre and their philosophy of universal design for learning and inclusivity in UCD and more generally in higher ed. I guess being in receipt of social goods such as educational development enables one to further participate and cultivate employment prospects and contribute to the utopian ideal of a better and more productive society that includes and provides opportunities for all its citizens. An inclusive higher educational institute like UCD is a great example of a liminal space that serves as a transient location which facilitates a community of teaching and learning and for most leads on to full and active participation in society. For me as a UCD student and an academic researcher, I'm actively involved in many roles which support and facilitate student development, such as learning enhancement strategies, academic advising projects, with the aim of creating a learning environment that empowers and allows other students to cultivate agency and achieve higher expectations and better learning outcomes. I guess for many of us students, the process of engaging in higher ed can be understood as a rite of passage, creating new social bonds and developing personal agency and social capital. And student orientation often includes activities that signify synchronization of major change and development in one's life course. And this significant period may also be reinforced by the split of town and gown. And this kind of liminal space facilitates the transition from school child to the status of independent adult, or in my case, mature student. The liminal state of being betwixt and between is emotional and sometimes uncomfortable. Yet the university space creates an environment where independence and empowerment is balanced with safe spaces that allow students to cultivate new identities and new ways of being within a social structure that delivers meaning. And UCD in many ways is a temporal location and a socio-structural vessel in which the individual's development and transformation is both inherently encouraged and is allowed to take place, root and flourish. I think it'd be appropriate to conclude this little kind of talk from my perspective anyway, by paraphrasing J.R. Newman, one of UCD's many patrons. So I think it went something like this, educational development is the cultivation of the intellect, leading to a society based on intellectual excellence, that in a manner of speaking, enhancing universal knowledge and is founded on the core values of fellowship and inclusion. And this, myself, I found to be true. So thanks very much.
Hi folks, my name is Amy and I am a neuroscience PhD student here in UCD and also part of an organisation called Disabled Women Ireland, which is an advocacy organisation comprised entirely of disabled women and non-binary people. But my journey in UCD actually started back in 2014, which simultaneously feels like just a second ago and also like a million years. And I came here to study science, but I think probably a more honest description of that, at least towards the end of my degree, was that studying science is what I did between my extracurricular activities. So over my time here at different points, I was a student ambassador, peer mentor, I worked with the Access Centre, and I also worked as a disability rights officer for the Students' Union. And I suppose this has given me a background in advocacy, particularly student advocacy that I continue to this day. But sitting here listening to Anu and Tobias in particular as they've been speaking, there's a couple of things that really strike me. And it's in relation to a concept of a university for all. And Tobias has spoken about it a little bit more eloquently than I can. But fundamentally, I think the purpose of a university for all is to create the opportunity for a student to come to UCD, or any university for that matter, and irrespective of their background, have the same experience as any other student. That is our goal. To create a space and an opportunity for students to tailor their university experience to their own wants and needs. And we know that this can be a really challenging thing to do. And as people who come from a minority background, and I say this as a disabled person myself, we experience significant barriers that prevent us from having that same student experience. And what we have to do through University for All is to remove and dismantle those barriers. So how do we do that? Well, that's the big question. And these are big, tricky questions and problems that require creative solutions. But I hopefully can summarize it in 3 points. The first thing that we need is to create platforms for students to act as advocates. And I think Anu has illustrated this concept really well, and it resonates a lot with my own experience. But if we want to create solutions, then we need to provide students with the space and the resources to create the solutions that are going to work best for their communities. We know how to do that, because we can draw on our own experiences as coming from these communities to create the things that we would have liked to have seen ourselves, the things that would have helped us the most. And we can focus on those barriers that are most impactful. But we need the space and we need resources in order for us to do that, and that is the job of the university. The second thing that we need is we need to bring students to the places where decisions are being made. And most importantly, we need to give students decision-making power. And this is a little bit scary, but it's not enough to just consult with students. We need to collaborate with us. We need to trust that students know best, because we do. We need a system where students from a variety of different experience and backgrounds can be part of decision-making and can influence the structures and the systems that create the barriers that we face. And we need to have control over what is done and how it is done. But there's a third thing that we need to do. And from my experience, I can tell you that being an advocate is challenging and it's expensive. Expensive in terms of time, resources, and energy. And this has 2 impacts. The first is that it impacts who can be advocates. Those of us who are the most marginalised don't have these extra resources to be advocates. So those of us who are the most marginalised are still not getting a seat at the table when those seats are available. But secondly, it also impacts our ability to be effective advocates. If we want students to be advocates in the ways that I've described and we've spoken about today, we need to put supports in place. And those supports need to be readily available. They need to be comprehensive and tailored to the individual needs of the student. And what this means practically is that if a student needs a reasonable accommodation, if they're disabled, it needs to be provided. If a student gives their time to a project, they need to be compensated for that. If a student needs a flexible working environment, we need to create that. Because if we don't provide these supports, what we are doing is creating barriers within the spaces that we're creating to get rid of the other barriers. So fundamentally, we need to do these 3 things. Create platforms for student advocates, give students decision-making power, and support their involvement at every step of the way.
Follow that. Thank you very much, all 3 of you. And I think you get a flavour of, I suppose, the way students have disrupted and challenged our thinking, particularly around University for All. And it struck me, I was thinking, Anu, when you were talking about the podcasts and the videos, you designed exactly what I wouldn't have. It's like when you ask someone for a direction, they say, well, I wouldn't have started here. And a lot of you have, in the time I've worked with you, been very gently redirecting me and saying, well, I wouldn't have started here if I were you. And I think you illustrated it beautifully today. So thank you very much. I think you've demonstrated that students are agents of change. So your contributions and commitment have challenged and moved our understanding. The Registrar referred to that earlier, and the Minister, of moving from us thinking about widening participation being just about opening doors. And I think Simon captured that beautifully when he was describing the rationale of Molly and how you can truly democratise what you're doing, because we're on a similar path in UCD with our University for All. Students like Tobias, Anu and Amy have been part of that process in enacting systemic change in every aspect of our university. Part of this process has prompted us as access professionals to foster a culture of innovation and creativity, to be proactive rather than reactive to student challenges, enabling students to be autonomous, independent, effective learners. Our access students and their voice prompt us to keep questioning what we do and how we do it. They help us join the dots so that we can see the bigger picture around student support, and later on you'll be hearing from our SU president, who really does see the bigger picture around the whole piece. We can see that student support is not just a series of operations or functions. We can see that all the dots can join to show a picture or a pillar which help us develop as a university for all. So our next challenge will be to determine how best to finish drawing up those dots. We're all agreed in our vision to be a university for all. Now we just need to fill in some of those gaps in creating that image. Earlier, the Registrar reminded us of Newman's vision and his prompt to turn our eyes to 100 years to come. And in that context, and as my concluding comments, I ask you to consider a future campus that values student support in the same way that it values teaching and learning. To consider an inclusive language that does not rely on the use of the word non to label or describe. In that future campus, there will be no non-traditional students and there will be no non-academics. Newman evokes a vision of an island I am gazing on between the road of passage and union between two hemispheres and the centre of the world. And in our ideal world, the centre of that world will be a university for all, where students are happily driving, shaping, disrupting and thriving, and in their future orations, they can look back into their archives like we have done and see the road travelled. And who knows, they may find deliberations from today and recognise that road of passage and the union between the two hemispheres that has allowed us learn from each other and ultimately come to recognising the value and sum of all our parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Bairbre. I'll take off my mask. Thank you, Tobias, Anu, and Amy. I think that was a wonderful presentation around disruption, around vision, and so eloquently delivered from all four of you. Thank you very, very much. And as Bairbre indicated, we're now hearing from the decision maker, as Amy suggested. Students need to be. Can I introduce Rory Power, who is the president of the Union of Students in UCD. Rory.
Díobh go léir agus gur míle maith agat ana san cuireadh chun bhenseo níomh chun leabhar faoin overtáachta sin. We're delighted to have been asked to contribute to the seminar today in such great company. Widening participation and creating a university for all really goes to the core of what the UCD Students' Union believes as an organisation. That education is a public good and nobody should be precluded or dissuaded from attending higher education institutes. The focus of the seminar today has rightly, I suppose, placed a focus on the invaluable role that student advocacy plays in creating a more inclusive, diverse university setting. UCD student access leaders, peer mentors, digital ambassadors are invaluable in providing assistance to the wider student body and demonstrate a really remarkable commitment to supporting students throughout their progression in their programmes. Without individual student leaders like the very impressive set of speakers we've just heard from, who go above and beyond to create an inclusive, supportive environment for others, UCD and the wider higher education sector would be far the worse for it. The event description also sets out the concept of systemic change and the ability of student leaders to bring it about, which I think is quite welcome. I've been working with the Students' Union in UCD for the past year and a half, and every day we see clear, demonstrable examples of members of UCD faculty and support staff who bend over backwards to ensure that students are supported, valued members of the UCD community. We know the risks associated with with falling short on widening participation. It impacts the quality of our research, solidifies existing inequalities in our society, and generally detrimentally impacts us as a community when we lock out groups who have to overcome significant barriers to get to university and present such a massive contribution to university life. As has been referenced repeatedly throughout this process, one of the most exciting developments we've seen in recent years is the concept of universal design in that process. It's a concept that in many ways revolutionises the way that university education is structured and how we interact with our campuses. I think the leadership from Dr. Lisa Padden, Amy particularly, and the UMT, in fairness, and we give them a hard time at times, in their support and real buy-in to that concept is very welcome. There's been significant sectoral advances in breaking down digital barriers of access with the laptop loan scheme, new funding allocations for supporting travellers and Roma students in higher education, implementation of the National Consent Framework, Athena Swan's targets for improving gender equality, and expansions in the SUSI eligibility criteria, and the University of Sanctuary programme, of course, plays a massive, invaluable role in bringing students who are living in direct provision into the fold as well. On an institutional level, it should be noted that all of these initiatives have been so successful because of the commitment of the Access and Lifelong Learning Centre to undertake large-scale efforts in mitigating the impacts of barriers of access, matched by the work of student leaders like our digital ambassadors, access leaders and peer mentors. That said, we can't have a conversation about breaking down barriers of access without addressing the serious detrimental impacts of the increasing commercialisation of our higher education institutes over a sustained period of time. Decades of centre-right governments have starved our universities of core funding and shifted the burden of payment to a regressive contribution charge structure and an over-reliance on international student fees. All of the aforementioned initiatives are really welcome mitigants to the structural barriers in existence, but they can never act as a substitute for the removal of the barriers themselves. Since the creation of the new Department of Further and Higher Education and Minister Harris's appointment, we'll give credit where it's due. We think the priorities have been in order. It's only right that within limited budgetary constraints, the utmost priority has been targeted investment at students at risk and the groups and areas that require it most. There has been a step change and a genuine, I suppose, meaningful willingness to address barriers of access, but I don't think it constitutes a systemic change at this stage. Whatever reforms are implemented to SUSI, it will never be a substitute for a universal model where delivery of higher education is free at the point of access, as is commonplace across Europe. And when I listened to, I was quite impressed with the Registrar's comments earlier on about removing those barriers, but the Irish Universities Association have demonstrated quite an opposition to the concept of universal higher education. That's something that needs to be looked at, and I really welcome the leadership from Professor Kirsten May in Limerick, who has been pushing the boat out on this, so hopefully she'll convince a few others and her own university leadership on that. Throughout COVID, we've seen the capacity and the requirement of the state to respond to immediate challenges. As Uachtaráin here and Michael D. Higgins remarked a few months ago, COVID has created an unanswerable case for universal basic services. The same scale of commitment shown during COVID is absolutely essential in challenging barriers of access to higher education. The same, I suppose, rising cost of living for students is the single greatest threat to achieving an equitable access pathway for students. In this year's budget, unfortunately, €500 million was gifted away in the forms of progressive tax breaks, while our public services cry out for investment. The cost of childcare is astronomical, public disability and mental health supports remain under-resourced, and students will continue to pay the highest fees, both undergraduate and postgraduate in Europe. That needs to change. Our mental health support staff on a university level worked around the clock to keep services ticking over during COVID, but there's a very clear requirement to plan forward and invest in the well-being of students. We strongly believe that the approach of ring-fencing funds for mental health supports through the HEA is the way forward, and we really welcome the leadership from Minister Harris on this. But we can't understate the scale of the challenges that our mental health support services, not just counselling services, but our GPs, our student advisors and academic advisors play in responding to mental health challenges. Moving past the National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Framework, we need to see the development of a fully costed plan for capacity increases in line with international best practice for staffing in our mental health support networks. In the spirit of Sláinte here, a centralised systemic overhaul of our support services is something that absolutely must be challenged by government. I'm a big fan of the motto that's employed by the Access unit, that access and inclusion is everyone's business. It underlines the requirement for institutional and governmental leadership on widening participation and the threats that are posed by silo-based decision-making that was referenced by the Registrar earlier. While UCD staff members go out of their way to accommodate students and create a more equitable campus, we have to recognise how these initiatives have been undermined by what I would term to be a discriminatory accommodation strategy. If a student hasn't got a secure place to stay, they can't meaningfully engage with their degree. Developing, quote, platinum, premium and penthouse accommodation for over €1,000 per month flies in the face of equality, diversity and inclusion. We're not asking for the wheel to be reinvented, and on a national level, campuses like Thurles, for example, have delivered the style of accommodation we need to see at a very reasonable price point. Conversely, here at UCD, somewhat affordable accommodation like Belgrove and Merville, which were constructed a number of decades ago, have had their prices racked up to finance the mortgage on the luxury bills. In effect, students from lower income backgrounds are subsidising the experiences of the most affluent on campus, and that's something that needs to change. We really welcome the commitment from Minister Harris to expand the concept of cost rental onto college campuses. The first time we heard it today, that was great. So I suppose what we're looking for is a bold state-led system change, and that's what's required. We have to expand cost rental trials onto our college campuses and set very stringent affordability criteria for eligibility for Housing Finance Agency loans. We need to abolish the student contribution charge and reduce fees for graduate students for those pathways. I want to just pay very briefly tribute to a number of other disruptors. There was a cohort of graduate entry medicine students a few years ago decided to take on the cost of graduate entry medicine fees and successfully campaigned through withholding their fees for a 2-year fee-free. So they really went out of their way not just to, I suppose, reduce their own fee burden, but to draw attention to the issue of sustainable funding going forward. I think that was quite commendable, as are our student nurses and midwives who campaign for proper supports there. So access and inclusion is everyone's business. We need to demonstrate that through public investment in our public services, as well in creating a programme of universal basic services. We have to recognise what's gone well, scale up funding of EDI and access-based initiatives, but equally the state has to take a hard-line stance on accommodation and end the policy of subsidising housing discrimination in UCD and across other college campuses. The challenge for the student movement going forward is to be constructive. We need to present clear, credible and costed solutions, work constructively with universities and government, but we also need to be honest. To fight against commercialisation and for a universal model of higher education is the single most important thing we can do to create a higher education system where we're all valued equally. The challenges we face are massive and the solutions are multifaceted. We'll work hard to combat these issues, and we have the utmost confidence that the Access and Lifelong Learning Centre will continue to provide a first-class standard of assistance to students who require it and have so much to offer to UCD. Ní nearcha Carla Céile agus gur míle amach as an gesture. Thanks.
I think the length of the applause says it all, Rory. That was a very powerful speech, which in my view hit all of the correct notes. You talked about a universal system and you talked about being bold, and you are in a long line of disruptors here today, and I thank you very much for that contribution. And you also used the word constructive. And I think since I met you, and I was thinking the other day, what was my first meeting with you? And since that day, I have found you constructive but challenging. And that's the way it should be, and long may it continue. And I think you provide very good leadership in terms of what we need to do next. Now, I'm conscious of the time. I know that Daniel and Lisa have been monitoring the chat lines, so to speak, but I don't think we have any time for questions. But you have been answering them, I hope. I know we are due to finish shortly, so I am going to finish with just a few words. I obviously want to thank everybody for their attendance here today. I want to thank everybody online. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your attention to these issues which are dear to our hearts. We obviously owe a huge debt of gratitude to all our speakers. Every one of them were visionary in their speech and what they laid out for us in higher education and specifically in UCD. We also owe a debt of gratitude to Simon, to Domitille and your colleagues for enthusiastically saying yes when we made that first phone call. I want to say a particular word about my colleague Bairbre. Bairbre has shown us the way. She said herself she has a vision or a picture and she wants us to join up the dots. So the courage that she has shown in terms of how we support students, backed up by the real life experience of our student speakers here today, I think is powerful testimony as to how we have to shape, we in higher education and we in further education have to reshape, rethink and radically review how we do student support in terms of how we deliver it to students, but how we value those of us who deliver that student support. To Amy, to Anu and Tobias, I want to thank you very much. You used the word, I think, Amy, eloquent, to describe how you found the contributions. They certainly were eloquent and elegant, and visionary. Rory, as I said, we are deeply grateful to you. I suppose in trying to organise any event like this, it takes an army of people, or to quote our colleague Daniel, an army of doers behind the scenes who are working hard to put this together. And a particular note of thanks goes to Dr. Dr. Lisa Padden, who is lurking down there in the background, who has tirelessly worked to shape this with Daniel on the project as well. And of course the wider Access and Lifelong Learning team, and I see David Owen in the audience. David and his team of operational staff have meant all the pieces have come together beautifully, and so we are grateful to all of you. We're very grateful to the audience, obviously, who attended today, and I want to finish with a quote, and we've had lots of quotes today, and I think for me the takeaway is courage, is the one word. I think if we could all walk away thinking about how we can be more courageous in what we do and what we think. So in the spirit of that, I will quote from the film Dead Poets Society, and Robin Williams in particular. And some of you may remember that Robin Williams played the role of the English teacher who sought to inspire his students to think differently, to do things differently, and to change perspective. So if you remember the scene, he leapt on top of the desk and he proclaimed to his students, who were eagerly anticipating what he was going to say, he said, "Why do I stand up here? I stand upon the desk to remind myself that we must constantly look at things differently. You see, the world looks very different up here. Just when you think you know something, you have to look at it another way. Even though it may seem silly or wrong, you must try." So I think that's the message for us. Thank you all very much.